Hello, hello. I'm so happy today to have Nuha Siddiqui, the CEO and co-founder of Erthos. So there are some people, Nuha, who you meet and they just make you happy. And you are one of those people. And we've met a couple of times, and it's just been such a joy to watch you operate, grow, and make your impact on this planet. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. And likewise, your inspiration is incredible and love to chat with you always.
Super. So we're going to start with growing up. I know a little bit about your early years, and you've had this experience of growing around the world. So would love to hear your story there, and in particular, if there were incidences that impacted what you do today in during your childhood. Maybe you saw some packaging, or there were impacts that happened, which are memories in your mind. It'll be great to hear those.
Yeah, definitely. So I actually was born in the Middle East, and my family is South Asian. So we have been living all over the world for a lot of generations. My family, before immigrating to Canada, of course, made sure that we were exposed to very different parts of the world and felt this deep sense of connection and responsibility to our communities. And I think that subconsciously a lot of that was a part of my upbringing, and that knowing that there was a lot more than just us. It was really important for us to feel responsible for our communities and make sure that we were always making impact. My parents worked really, really hard to immigrate us to Canada. So my brothers and I, of course, always felt like we had to make them proud, and they always wanted that sense of stability for us growing up here in Canada. I think for them, stability meant careers in engineering or accounting or medicine, not so much entrepreneurship. So I think that was a bit of a shock when I decided to start Erthos. But in some ways, I like to blame them because I tell them that, you're the one who told us to go after big things and want to do big things with our careers. So I think they finally have come around to it, but it is a huge part of my upbringing and why I do what I do every day.
Yeah, and if I can ask, what were your parents doing that took them all around the world and Middle East and then eventually Canada?
Yeah, so my parents always knew that they wanted to bring us here to Canada, but it took them a lot of different paths. So first moving to the Middle East, and then finally moving here to Canada. I come from a family of accountants, so both my brothers and my father, all accountants. So that's sort of the reason why I also chose to pursue accounting and in business school, and ultimately, secretly, was studying environmental economics, and that's when I discovered my passion for solving climate change through social entrepreneurship. But originally, my path that was set out for me was accounting.
And that was really interesting when I was actually reading about you. And I would love to learn more. What made that shift, this draw towards ecology or environment? How did that happen?
Yeah, so it was the year 2016. So I was in Rotman U of T Business School, and I was studying for accounting. So my days were full of just spreadsheets and Excels and trying to master that. But in 2016, it was a big year for two reasons. The first is that that's when the World Economic Forum released the report around how by 2050 there would be more plastic than fish in our oceans. And so that was a moment I remember very clearly because it felt like 2050 wasn't that far away. That was in our lifetime. That's something that we potentially will be able to see. And I just couldn't believe that, given the amount of technology and innovation that we're seeing around the world, that was the future that we were headed. And the second piece was I was a part of a social entrepreneurship club called Enactus at school and university. And the entire foundation of that organization was trying to solve world issues through business and through impact. And there was also a massive food waste challenge here in Canada at the time. And there were a lot of manufacturers and producers who were uh, asking for solutions for some of their food waste. And one in particular was McCain, which is a potato company. I'm sure you've eaten some of their French fries before. I love them. And so they actually had a call to action for a few different students around the world, and they asked for a solution for some of their byproducts in their waste. And so part of this club, I was always prototyping and trialing various different social impact businesses and social impact ideas. But it was this one in particular that really clicked because I felt like there was an opportunity to just connect the dots and connect this massive plastic problem we were having with a massive agricultural problem that we were having, and ultimately just went to McCain and tried to pitch it. And they ended up awarding us a research grant. And so that's where things really started shifting for me and for my team. And I was able to actually kickstart a research project at U of T, aside from everything I was doing already, which is accounting, but I was spending my nights now prototyping various different packaging materials made out of plants.
What was the research grant about, and what did it entail?
The initial research was around using some of their potato byproducts and some of their starch ingredients and turning it into packaging. So, our dream at the time was to create the most non toxic, edible packaging materials through these ingredients, and that's where our research started. Of course, over time, that grew and evolved to what it is today, but that was the starting of it all.
But why you? You were an accounting person, and why would McCain say that? Huh? Take my starchy waste and convert it to something packaging. Of
Yeah.
course, you must have pitched it, but why would they choose you as an organization? They could have chosen a material science kind of
Yeah.
organization or something like that. So what was it? How did you charm them into thinking that you could create this?
I don't know if it was charm or me just being insanely passionate about this. In some cases, I look back and I think, would I have predicted where we are today back then when I was just in that room pitching this project? And at the time, I think there was a little bit of me being naive about what was coming my way. But I also think that it was just the passion and the fact that we were representing future generations. Our entire team represents a solution that's designed for future generations to reverse that 2050 statistic. It's not about having that research or credibility today, but it's about making sure that we're doing everything we can to get us there for the future. So, why did they choose us? I think I didn't give them any other choice, but also I think it was a shot they wanted to take.
So where did that project go, or where did it end up? What did you guys learn, or what did you try to create, and what actually happened if there was an end of that project, what happened there?
Yeah, so we did prototype for a few years. So while we were all completing our different degrees, that's also where I met my co founders. So, one a plant biologist and another a chemical engineer. Because, like you said, I was a business student, so the science was not my expertise. But I found some brilliant people at U of T who really came on to the project and were able to accelerate the research. We ended up creating our first prototypes, which were packing peanuts, and they were made out of McCain's byproducts. So you've probably seen those tiny.
Wow, that's amazing.
So that's where it started, and we called ourselves Eco Packers. So that was the name at the time. And things were going really well. We finally discovered the power of biomaterials. And then when it came time to actually sell the product, we were realizing that there were a lot of other challenges that existed in the industry. And given the fact that we were in Canada, we're not necessarily always exposed to plastic manufacturing. It's not one of our top industries. So we decided to take the little money that we had left after graduation and we flew to Asia. So we went to Taiwan, we went to Hong Kong, we went to China, and I spent a majority of my time just knocking on the doors of as many plastic manufacturers as I possibly could, just to understand what challenges currently exist with the current supply chain, because we've heard of bioplastics, we've heard of biomaterials, but we still weren't seeing that massive adoption at scale, and clearly there was a challenge there. So we sat down with a lot of our manufacturers, and they all expressed the challenges they had around compatibility, and the fact that a lot of other bioplastics or biomaterials often cause them to completely retool or find new equipment, and it was a major disruption to their existing infrastructure. And so that's when things really changed for us, because we decided, we had this research, we had a deep understanding of some of the biomaterials we could use, but instead of focusing on packing peanuts or packaging, maybe there was a way we could take a step back and focus on just the raw building blocks of plastics. And so we came back, we pivoted the company into the platform that it is today, and eventually raised our first round of funding.
That's amazing. Like to actually, you do have an entrepreneur in you then, to actually take that horse cart and say that, okay, I'm going to travel all over Asia and learn about this because, I was told that if you make a grid saying skill and talent, entrepreneurs actually start at the lower quadrant, and then you try and build from zero to finding the talent and everything else. So it's kind of shows in your journey that you didn't know anything about this, but you wanted to tackle something and you were ready to take it head on. So why did you choose to just visit plastic manufacturers, or did you visit both bioplastic and plastic manufacturers? And of course, you're talking about the converters, but did you also manage to visit people who were making starch-based stuff or things like that?
Mhm.
How did you decide that these are the people you want to visit and go about visiting them?
Yeah, so I think for us, because we were already creating our own packaging materials, we wanted to focus on understanding the resin business, and understanding, the manufacturing process of resins, and how, if we could just change the root material, what would that process look like for us? So we decided to focus in on traditional polypropylene and polystyrene manufacturers, really understand what some of the gaps were there. And then we also worked with converters, so manufacturers who were taking these PP and PS pellets and then turning it into cutlery or, packaging. And they were the ones who were able to give us a lot of that honest feedback around biomaterials that they've tested and some of the gaps that existed there. And so we always wanted to make sure that we were standardizing our process and our manufacturing to traditional plastics, because ultimately they are our users, and in some ways we want to make sure to disrupt just the right amount of disruption, I guess, in our material.
I think that's really wise because if we try and disrupt everything, you cannot disrupt the entire supply chain. There's billions
Yeah.
and billions of dollars invested in these converting facilities, and you cannot just change them overnight. So I think it's always good to adapt the material rather than trying to change the conversion. So that's really wise. And I'm sure there were a lot of learnings. You mentioned one, and then you said you pivoted the company, and that's, of course, a big decision in itself. But can you share more of the learnings that came from this, this kind of deep dive into what is happening?
Yeah.
And how did that influence his Erthos journey eventually?
Yeah. So I think the compatibility piece and making sure we're building scalable solutions at volume were really, really key. But I think the other piece that we learned very early on was the holistic view on sustainability, and the fact that, it's not enough to just claim biodegradable. It's definitely not enough to claim recyclability. And the fact that it's so important to look at the solution in a holistic way from the very beginning of the production process, making sure we can calculate the environmental footprint of it all the way to the end of life. And 6, 7 years ago, compostable infrastructure looked very different. And when we were claiming compostability, it was just considering natural environments and making sure that we could ultimately create materials that were non-toxic and safe, regardless of where you were in the world and what infrastructure you had access to. And so the holistic sustainability principles were very, very core to us, and influences us today as well. And then I think just the inclusivity of solutions. So we never wanted to build a solution that was so niche where it would only be available or effective in the US, for example. We wanted to make sure that we were building solutions that could actually support and solve major issues in communities around the world, especially those who are disproportionately impacted by plastics. We all have seen the stats around the plastic crisis and the climate crisis and how it's so correlated to different geographies in the world. And so that was really important for us too in ensuring that it was truly scalable, inclusive, and holistic.
Yeah, and these are tough aims because you're trying to you've also got to survive commercially and you have to kind of stick to your values. And then we're going to get deeper into that. But I want to pivot a little bit and ask you more about your co-founders because I've met Kritika, a wonderful person who
Yeah.
you partner with and I see you guys together, but you mentioned one more person. So tell me more about each of you and how you managed to come together.
Mm-hmm. So Kritika joined while we were at U of T, and Kritika comes from a background of plant biology, but very similar to myself. She was on the path to becoming a lawyer, so very different career as well. And she had initially actually seen me pitch the initial idea to McCain at the time. And the way that she tells the story is that she says that she stalked me for a couple months because she connected so deeply to the cause and to the project itself. I like to say that I found her, but we have a battle here. We sometimes argue about that one. But ultimately, she did join during our time at university, and she led a lot of the discovery around plant ingredients and how we can really unlock the potential of these plant byproducts. And then our third co founder was actually a chemical engineer. So we knew that we had to ensure that these ingredients we were looking at could truly scale in chemical manufacturing processes around resin production and everything else. And so she came with the expertise of chemistry and plant chemistry specifically as well.
Yeah, that's a good group to have together with different skill sets. But Nuha, I'm just kind of inquisitive. You could have done this without doing entrepreneurship. Why entrepreneurship? That's a tough road to take, right? You can always join a company that is doing something in the domain, work there, and maybe 10 years later, what really impresses me also is your level of maturity at the stage of life you are at. So it's beautiful for me to see that. And of course, something is inherent in you, and I guess you've learned over time, you know, by doing the things that you've done, but you could have chosen an easier path. You can still achieve that same aim of a cleaner planet or whatever motivates you. But why did you embrace entrepreneurship, or you just didn't know?
Um, yeah, you know what? I think it took a lot of time to think through the different paths. And actually, I did have a job offer to join a big four, go down the corporate path. And you know, I knew that if I went down that path, I would have to wait the 10 years, and then maybe I could start something of my own or join a charity or non for profit. I knew that I ultimately always wanted to end up in something that was impact driven. But at that point in time in 2018, when I was making a decision around whether I would join this corporate or start the company, I felt like there was this sense of urgency, not just because of the material or the research that we were doing, but also just given the industry and the fact that I could not live with myself knowing that I could have possibly contributed to this solution in some way if I could at that time. If 10 years down the road, we get another stat report which said by 2040, we're going to see more plastic than fish in our oceans. Like, I think I just couldn't bear it knowing that there was an opportunity to do something about it. And of course, it wasn't the popular decision, especially not with my family and everything else. But I think it was more just thinking about, would I regret this? Would I not? And is this the time to do it? It's always just whether things are the right time sometimes, right? Especially with entrepreneurship and everything that we're doing. So to me, I just never looked back. I couldn't imagine doing anything else. So yeah, a little bit of naivety, but like a lot of just knowing that I would regret it. And I knew that I could do something and I wanted to do it.
I'm sure you know of a beautiful Indian poet from the 15th century, Kabir. And Kabir has this beautiful couplet, and he speaks in beautiful couplets, and it's always kind of contradictory. But one of the things he says is that it's always better to do and regret than not do and regret. So I think you've kind of put that really in practice. And the other one that came to my mind as you were speaking was this friend of mine who keeps calling me, that he hasn't called me for a bit. I should call him, but he keeps calling me to say, Ved, I need this product. I cannot launch this product till I have a biodegradable packaging. And this is something like a sunscreen or something. And I tell him, Ridha, you know, we are in food packaging. We cannot make this. No, 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 no. You got to try. You got to make this. I won't be able to launch my product. And I'm like, okay, we will try. We'll find you a solution. And then he'll call again after some time. I said, Rita, these things take time. You can't just call me in a week and say, is it ready? And he's like, dude, you have to realize the earth doesn't have time.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
yeah, but it's become our mantra as well when we're talking in the development team. We're like, guys, earth doesn't have time, or actually
Yeah.
humanity doesn't have time. Earth has all the time. But it's
Yeah.
interesting that you took that as well, and kind of moved forward. So I'm going to now dig deeper into what became of Erthos after you did this whole kind of journey, understanding the market, understanding the supply chain, the conversion processes, getting a deeper know-how into how things are done. What became of it? When you came back, what did you guys think? Okay, this is how you want to pivot and make this
Mhm.
beautiful company that you've created.
Yeah. So when we came back and we pivoted, we decided to approach the industry more so from a platform perspective. So we wanted to be able to create our own biomaterials that could fit into existing infrastructure, but also provide the same sustainability benefits. And in order for us to really master that, we knew we had to live on the ground near the plastic industry. So we went back to Asia. We lived there for about a year, and that's when our initial manufacturers were willing to pilot with us. They were willing to use our materials and test it in their equipment. And so we started off with choosing to create a biomaterial for polypropylene replacements, just considering how broad polypropylene is and how much of packaging it covers and how many different applications it had. And so we thought if we started with polypropylene, that gives us a really great base to prove out some of these technical requirements that we're aiming for. And so we spent a few months in trial, in production, and pilots, and we ultimately had our first pilot actually in a zipper and buckle manufacturing site. So a very different industry, not even an industry that we currently service, but it was a manufacturer who was willing to give us a shot in Asia, and their molds were buckles and zippers. And so we thought, okay, let's give it a shot. It's still manufacturing, it's still injection molding. And so we successfully were able to validate that. And then it unlocked a whole new range of opportunities for us to work with brands like AB InBev and other CPGs who were looking for similar solutions. And then today we have leveraged that initial biomaterial, but now we've expanded the scope of it. We've expanded the actual ingredients. So we leverage over 100 different ingredients today to formulate and craft these materials for various applications. Ultimately, we're targeting applications that are hard to recycle or very difficult to recycle, and provide a great alternative in a more compostable way.
Now you've opened a whole box. Now I have 100 questions popping into my brain. So get
You know
ready.
what? Some of these stories I've really never even shared. I don't even think we've talked about
No,
buckle
this is
manufacturers. So
but this is amazing, because when you go into the unknown, you never know where you'll end up and who's going to be receptive. But I want to start with the base material. I want to start with, was it the same as what you explored with McCain? How did that evolve? Because it's a lot about, what is the starch or the
yeah,
base substance that you're going to use. And what continues to inspire and amaze me is that you guys are still a bunch of youngsters, and there are people out there who spend 30 years in the bioplastic domain alone, and they're trying to create these amazing compounds, but then you also come out with very interesting products. So, throw some light on what was the base material that you felt can do the magic that you want to do. And then how did you guys go about exploring this? Did you find other experts? Did you guys just go ahead and keep kind of doing the alchemy and mixing things together and see what comes out and doing some, blasts along the process? How did that journey happen on the base material?
Yeah, so we did take a lot of what we learned from our base research, which was primarily around starches and byproducts in that industry. And then because we were in Asia and we were exploring local resources in Asia, it unlocked this whole new range of ingredients. So I think that it organically happened for us where we started recognizing that, the formulations themselves have a certain structure, but the ingredients we can leverage for this formulation could be varied across the world. So a fiber doesn't necessarily have to be a specific fiber. It can be a fiber from different types of plants, and same with starches, and same with some of the bioadditives we use for binding agents. So these exist in a lot of different forms around the world. And initially, it started expanding mainly because we were in Asia and we needed a new supply chain. We needed to be able to access that. But then it unlocked this opportunity to also scale globally with ingredients locally, and we wanted to be able to do that for the long run. It wasn't us alone. We wanted to make sure we were growing our team at the time as well. So today we're a team of 20, and a majority of our team are incredible PhDs and scientists who come from this field, who have done a lot of research on their own plant ingredients or biopolymers or different additives that they've been building. And we've sort of all come together with the same passion and mission, and we've been able to take what we initially started and just expand and evolve that database significantly.
Yeah, but when you think about different materials and each, it may be a starch, but from a different strain, and I presume it will behave differently. It may
Mm-hmm.
not homogenize. So I guess you have to still standardize. If you're using
Yeah.
a fiber, then there is a standardization, because my presumption is that it'll all behave differently. Coming from a manufacturing background, standardization and homogenization is really, really important. And
Mm-hmm.
did you have to struggle with that at all?
Yeah.
That's the first part, just staying with the ingredient side. And then, of course, jumping on to your product, which was replacement of polypropylene. And how did that come about? But we'll park that as the second part. The first part still would be homogenization. And then, of course, how did we get into identify that that's the one you want to work out at?
Yeah. That took a good chunk of our early time, was actually making sure that the ingredients we were leveraging, the plant byproducts, were compatible with our extrusion processes. So we use traditional resin extrusion lines, and then we also have our own pre-processing methods that we have in-house. So the pre-processing is proprietary to us. It really is where we are able to extract and bind the right byproducts and fibers, and then it goes through a very standardized resin conversion method. And so it is ultimately a chemical transformation, but it allows us to really create these uniform pellets. So when you see our pellets, you sometimes won't even recognize that they're different than plastics, because we've spent a lot of time making sure we know exactly the type of fiber, the type of powder form, the type of binding agent that will allow it to be uniform in our manufacturing process.
And why polypropylene? Why not polyethylene? What inspired that? That I'm going to take this material and now apply it to this singular kind of domain. Because I also ask that because I see a lot of companies when they enter the business, they just want to tackle everything. So
Yeah.
I was very intrigued when you said I wanted to tackle polypropylene first, because that, of course, is a more difficult path, but in a way more rewarding, that you want to
Mhm.
get one thing right and then move into another. So how did
Yeah.
that happen?
So when we were looking at different applications, so of course we started off with the goal to eliminate or find replacements for single-use plastics and single-use packaging. And when we were looking at the breakdown of the type of resins that were used for a lot of these products, majority of it was polypropylene, especially in the rigid space. And we also knew that rigids were difficult. They were very difficult to get right from a functionality perspective. So we felt like there was a gap, and there was also an opportunity for us to focus in on that. Early prototypes of our material also showcased extreme strength and durability for our material, and so we felt as if we could also do industrial applications and various different polypropylene use cases, it gives us a large opportunity to tap into this market and also provide a solution that can scale. So it was a challenge, and I think that was a part of why we decided to do it.
But these are not single use. When you talk about, like,
Yeah.
obviously you have to try somewhere, so I understand the zipper and buckles, but the other rigids are also many times not single use. And
Mhm.
what you started with was that I want to work towards a single use. So how did that, was that a
Yeah.
contradiction or was that just a step in that direction?
Yeah, I think it was a step in that direction. Right now, we have this category of limited use is what we call it. So there's single use, of course, but then there's limited use, and that we classify as sometimes products that maybe you'll use for a few months and then you will dispose of, or are used for shipping maybe for a few weeks and then they're disposed of. So there are some applications that we feel are still highly disposable, but maybe not as single use. And so applications like shampoo bottles or personal care containers.
Yeah, now I know I can send my friend Ridha your way. You just mentioned shampoo bottles. I can say,
Yes.
the Earth doesn't have time. I'm good, and now you have Nuha, so she can sort it for you, even if I cannot. So you can go different directions, and you kind of alluded to it, and you alluded to making materials. Why make materials when you can just make resins and focus on that, and let others do the actual conversion into injection molding or whatever needs to be done?
Yeah, so we do still only do the materials. We only focus on the resin. The resin itself is what we would then provide to a manufacturer to convert it into whatever form factor. And then in the case that we're working with the CPG, they'll typically ask us to embed our materials or our resins into their existing molds and manufacturing systems. So we still remain focused on the materials and really innovating around that. We're not a packaging company anymore. EcoPackers is long gone. So now we focus in on just making sure we're building the best composites, the best resins, the best additives so that they can be useful for any application.
Aha, so that's a correction for me. I thought you were making both the products and the materials or the resins, but that's a good correction for me.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, because when I look at your website, there are multiple products, but I guess that's just to showcase how the resin can be used. Okay,
exactly.
got it. Okay, but you also said a little while back that there are 100 different ingredients that you've worked with. So when you're making a certain product, do you have to change the ingredients in order to give a certain kind of resin? And does that keep altering with not just with the product, but also where the consumer is located? Does
Yeah.
that make a big difference? And do you manufacture yourself, or you also have kind of facilities where you can provide the chemistry and the compounding, and then they can kind of do it for you? How does the model work? How does the business
Mhm.
model work?
Yeah, so we have our sort of off the shelf resin grades. So these are biomaterials that we've already designed for different use cases. And then in the case where our partners want to create something more custom for a specific application, that's when we'll leverage different ingredients and create the perfect blend for them. And that is typically based off of any mechanical properties that they have or sustainability features that they'd like to achieve. And then on the manufacturing side of things, we do manufacture in house here in Canada, but we also have partnerships in Asia as well as in North America here in the US, which allow us to leverage compounders who can create the resin for us at a larger volume. So we're able to get to commercial scale volume for our partners relatively quickly with these partnerships. And in the case that they're in a completely new region, we'll find partners to make sure we can service that as well.
Yeah, that makes sense because then you can be a little more asset light. And now I come back to the initial discussion that we were having in terms of end of use and incorporating that within the product. How challenging is it, especially when you're trying to do rigids? Are you totally, as Erthos, are you totally clear that you're only going to do home compostable, or you're okay with industrially compostable? Are you okay with just recyclable? Where do you stand on that spectrum now?
Hmm. So we do have, a list of different sustainability claims for our materials, and they are split between the source and then the end of life. So of course, 100% bio-based or bio-based material certifications are really key for us at the source. And then we also design based on carbon footprint. So a lot of our formulations are lower carbon, and some partners have a very strict sort of target that they're looking to meet there. And then on the end of life, we do both compostable from a home and industrial perspective based on thickness. So because our material can be used in so many different applications, some of our more limited use products that may be thicker, we may recommend that a more industrial setting makes more sense for that. Whereas if they're single use, like a floss pick or anything else, those are typically designed for home compostable applications. So it really varies. The one thing we don't do right now is recyclability, because the goal is to create materials that are a better solution than recyclability. So we focus in on just compostability at the end of life.
And that's truly remarkable, because I find that we tend to kind of digress from that goal very quickly. Also, not just, and I'm going to get to, because you've mentioned in a couple of places around policy and policy influence, but I also find that even as policy makers, it's very easy to slide into recyclability, and it baffles me many times because
Mm-hmm.
one, there is no such thing as recyclability; it is going to get downcycled, and that at some point it has to get out of that chain because there has to be an end of use of that material. And I don't know why, but people kind of forget that. If
Yeah,
flexible packaging can be made monomaterial and recycling, it's okay. But how can that be okay? Because, in the end, it has to get out of the loop. And where does that happen? Okay, 5 times, 6 times, this material, that material, and obviously on the base level, the collection and recycling itself is a challenge. And by whatever you've been saying, it seems like you're very, very customer centric and try and understand what the customer really needs and then try and develop that. How difficult or easy has that journey been of identifying the right markets, identifying the right customers, then convincing them that, yeah, guys, tried this? Tell
yeah.
me more about, how's that responsiveness been for you?
Yeah, I think that, generally everyone wants to change. They want to adopt something new, and they want to be able to have sustainability claims for their own targets. But I think that, you know, you said it already, but policy plays a huge part in that, in influencing our customers and our partners, because they typically are operating all over the world, and each country has a different definition for what compostable is, what plastic free is, and it's confusing. It's very confusing for our customers and our brands. And so, in a lot of cases, we're just spending a lot of time building awareness and educating them on some of these nuances. And it takes time, but that's why we want to make sure that they're a part of the journey and they feel like they're a part of building these solutions that ultimately fit for their supply chains and their industry. I think they know that there's a lot of shifts, and we probably likely won't see a uniform policy or definition for at least a few years now, maybe next year. Let's see with the treaty negotiations. But until then, they still need to make adjustments and they still need to make changes. So, having them involved in that has made it easier for us to then design the right solution without having to, reverse back and do it again, and so on. So, yeah, I think it's a long journey, but it's one that I think is so essential.
Absolutely. And I think you're mentioning that you really understanding how the supply chain works, the converter works. I'm sure that plays a big part. And delving a little bit deeper on the processing itself, are you able to crack it like one to one? As in, if a polypropylene pellet has a certain melt flow index, and other properties. Are you able to kind of give the converter that kind confidence that this will not behave differently, or there is still a difference, but the difference is not huge enough that the converter has a problem? How do you tackle that piece?
Mhm. One for one. That's our claim. And that's been what we validated across 25 different applications so far across 5 different industries. So we did a period of rapid iteration and rapid trials with a lot of manufacturers around the world. Um, Luckily, having that first proof point was the biggest thing for us because we knew that a lot of manufacturers were have been burnt in the past from other experiences that they've had with biomaterials physically burning their equipment. Like that's the reality of some of these ingredients. But we were able to prove out that it was truly one for one for manufacturing in injection molding.
And I'm sure, like having been in this industry, I'm sure that's music to the ear, especially to the converters, because there is no adjustment then, and because otherwise they have to do a lot of kind of research on their end to make sure things flow right and behave right. And like you said, do not impact their equipment or their cycle times. If you think about all the applications that you have, what is the biggest that where you're getting the most traction, and which one are you most excited about?
Hmm. We actually have this exercise in the office. We all have our own favorite products, each one of us, and it's we all have a different one. For me, I think where I think our traction is coming from is caps and closures. So a lot of caps and closures that are maybe on a PET bottle or on other applications. We are able to create a one for one alternative to materials used for that application, and these are typically the ones that you see on the side of the road, right? Like it's easy to recycle a water bottle, but the cap is what often gets missed. And so that's one. What I'm most excited about are some of these more industrial applications that maybe are limited use, mainly because I feel like my dream is for biomaterials to just become a part of our everyday lives, regardless of whether it's single use or limited use, because I think the human health aspect of everything is now becoming a lot more evident as well. In the fact that even if it's not a single use product, if it's something that you use on a daily basis, it is leaking into our environments. It's actually impacting us as humans. And so I think I'm excited about some of the more, beauty, personal care, things that we use on a daily basis that really are impacting us and creating solutions for that.
I keep having discussions with my wife on polyester, and she likes the stretchy fabrics, and I'm like, gosh, there's so many microparticles that are
I
going in, and
know.
it's not even downcyclable. And
I
she's
know.
like, okay, I'll go to a thrift store and do it, but I like the feel. I said, oh my gosh. So, but
No.
yeah, those are challenges. The other challenge I found with customers, and I'm sure you have also thought about this, is the scale some of the customers need. For example, we were working with a large conglomerate that was making these small sachets for shampoo, and we were trying to replace that. And that sachet alone, Nuha, just in India, was the need was 16,000 tons a year.
Mm.
So if I think about it from the customer's point of view, that's such a challenge. So I can give them a niche product, but if I'm able to not give them
Yeah.
16,000 tons, they cannot solve that. So how are you thinking about scale? Do you see that if a customer like that comes to you and say that I have one product that I want you to replace and it's 16,000 tons, I'm okay to pay you the 30-50% premium. Would you be able to do that, and how would you go about carrying that process out? And they'll say, they understand that you are not producing the sachet itself, but you have to work with the converters to make sure it gets replaced. And how would you tackle that kind of challenge?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's what we've seen with a lot of the applications we've worked on. We've done mass scale cutlery, for example, which are high volumes, very disposable. But then we have done some more niche product applications. But even those niche product applications are very large volumes. Auto packaging, even though maybe niche, it's the volumes are in, uh, you know, 15 to 20 tons a year or whatever it may be. And so I think that we always like to approach each formulation with that in mind, where we look at the volume of each ingredient. We try to make sure that it can actually meet what the potential scale could be in 10 years and 20 years. So we do a lot of supply assessments first and ensuring that we're selecting the right ingredient for a larger volume. And then the second piece of scalability for us is the manufacturing of it. So that's why we worked really hard to partner with compounders, where you can essentially find a compounder pretty much anywhere in the world. And so it doesn't limit the volume that we can manufacture, and we can actually do it for anyone locally. So I think those are the two things we try to make sure we incorporate it into our process for large volume. And the compatibility, again, even though it's a benefit for our customers, it's also a benefit for us at the production level, and making sure we can scale with, less customized and less custom capex investments.
Just to get my stats right, you said 15 to 20 tons, or was there some zeros missing?
15 to 20,000 tons, sorry.
Yeah, okay. Phew, I was talking about 16,000 tons. Did she just mention 15 to 20 tons? Because that's very different. No,
No,
that's
no.
amazing. So yeah, if you can do 15 to 20,000 tons, and because it's a bunch of things, right? You and I know, as trying to run businesses, that it's the supply chain, it's the raw
Yeah.
material, it's the compounding capacity, it's the delivery capacity, it's the on-time delivery, it's the consistent quality. So there is a bunch of things that go into being, it's very different. Scaling from a lab to a pilot, I think, is way easier than pilot to commercial, because there's so many nuances that come in
Yeah.
to the system. And I'm glad that you're working at those scales as well, while solving various kind of product challenges. So that let's shift towards policy, because we it's alluded to it and then moved away. I see you spending time on this. I know that you were at COP28. You've talked about the importance of policy. So clearly, you see that as the CEO of this company, you have to invest time in this direction. So talk to me more about your thinking in that direction, and why you choose to kind of put in personal effort and time in a domain that may or may not kind of directly impact the business.
Yeah. Um, you know, Erthos is a product company, we're a materials company, but we're also trying to be a part of a movement towards a better planet. And I think that requires a lot of advocacy and awareness, and making sure that our voices are being heard on a global level. Um, I think that our voices are not always in the conversation when policies are being crafted and created. So we personally feel as if it's our responsibility to do that on behalf of, our innovations, other innovations like ours, and make sure that, governments realize that there is a solution out there that can be a part of our roadmap for the next 10 years. And I can kind of give you an example of why it triggered us early on. But in Canada, Canada was one of the first countries to release a single use plastic ban. And the single use plastic ban was 6 different items that we use on a daily basis. And then they were also providing definitions around what would be considered an alternative to some of these single use plastics. And unfortunately, the first draft of this policy defined all bioplastics and biomaterials as the same as plastic. And they didn't necessarily see the difference. So, of course, as a Canadian company, we were not happy about that. We invited all the ministers in our country to our office to come and see what we were doing, to see what could be possible. And it took a lot of time to share our story, share what it really meant. But ultimately, this year, they decided that, it was actually time to change that. And they were rewriting the policy because they recognized that, you can't just blanket every biomaterial into the same bucket as plastics. And solutions that they were putting forward were heavily skewed towards the recycling industry. And so we know that it takes time, and we're a small part in this, but if we can play any role in trying to make sure that policies are more inclusive to innovation and technologies that are future facing, then we'll continue to do it.
Yeah, that's so important. And sometimes in the kind of the daily grunt work, we forget that we also have to focus on the larger macro kind of picture as citizens of this planet and as people running businesses. So tell me, you went to COP28 representing Canada. That's pretty grand. And like, what was that like? And what did you think about that whole experience?
Yeah, it was incredible and overwhelming all at once. It was amazing. It was our first time actually attending COP, and to attend as official delegates was a huge honor, especially in Canada. I think we were just generally so inspired by some of the work that we're seeing in different communities. We were also frustrated at the pace at some of the direction of policy and how we're looking at fossil fuel reduction, and that was of course disappointing in a lot of different ways. Um, the biggest takeaway we had was that nature-based solutions are still at the forefront, which was very positive. And the plastic crisis was a key topic, especially with plastic treaty negotiations happening this year in April. And recycling was not a solution that was promoted across COP, and it wasn't something that was as evident as it is here in North America. And so I think that was just really refreshing to see, because I think here in Canada and the US, that's the go to when we think about solutions for plastic waste. But on a global platform level and at COP, it was a solution that was actually getting a lot of criticism publicly. And I think that was something that we genuinely appreciated, just being able to see that and to see how it was influencing some of the nature-based solutions.
That's definitely very positive for me to hear that you could actually see that, because it actually disheartens us as well when we look at the policy frameworks that are emerging. Because not just North America, when I'm looking at the EU kind of regulation, which used to be very forward looking, has found
Yeah.
this easier route of recycling, but it's not the solution, but kind of easy to put it and maybe they're thinking of it as steps in that direction. But I felt that it was very positive, because there's so much politics at that level, and there are so many things that people have to tackle. But even the idea that they be going to slowly move away from fossil fuels, that in itself is a huge statement. Now,
Yeah.
whether it happens, how it happens, okay, that we have to see. We'll wait and watch. But and to hear from you that it's not just moving away from fossil fuel, but even recycling was not at the forefront is great to hear. And
Yeah.
I'm glad that you were there to push that cause.
Hmm. Yeah, it's really refreshing for sure to hear that. And it is a struggle. You're absolutely right. I think it's just not North America. I think each region influences each other, and then we see just scattered policy, right? It's just so fragmented right now.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to move towards funding, and I know that you've successfully raised multiple rounds and built Erthos. So one, of course, lessons for the listeners on how do you raise funding, and then lessons for the listener on how do you stop raising funding and become profitable slowly. So give us both of those.
Sure. Yeah, so our funding journey began at the seed level. So we raised, a pre-seed round here in Canada, and then we raised a seed and a Series A. So our latest round of funding was our Series A, which was last year. Um, I think that we're so grateful to have been able to raise that, especially in our industry where we do have CapEx requirements. We do need that funding to set up and prove it. Uh, it was a big part of what we needed to get to our milestones. When we started fundraising, as I mentioned, I was a recent grad. It's not like I had a track record of other businesses, and I had a huge network or anything like that. And so the first year, I really spent just building my network and showcasing our proof points, and making sure we were building credibility. And it took, unsuccessful rounds for it to actually make sense, because when we first went to start fundraising, we fundraised with eco-packers. That was our business model back then. But it was because of some of those discussions we had with potential investors where they pointed out some of the gaps, they pointed out some of the challenges to scale, and we told them, okay, you know what, give us 3 months, we'll be back. We went to Asia, we came back, and we showcased what we learned. And so I think, given that we didn't come from that credibility, and showcasing that in a very quick way early on was definitely a key part of how we raised that first round. Um, and then on the flip side, how to stop fundraising. That's a question I'm trying to answer myself right now. I think that it's hard not to. When you start raising venture capital, you feel like you need to raise a B, a C, a D, go to whatever level you need to go. But right now, especially given current market conditions, our goal is profitability and making sure that we can be scalable and sustainable in a lot of different ways. And so I think for us now, anytime we think about new investment, we're thinking about it more from a strategic perspective. If they're truly bringing in strategic value for us to scale, or potentially have resources, or strategic alliances that we can form. So we're really thinking about investors from that perspective now, rather than VCs, which we've typically raised from in the past.
Yeah, and it's remarkable what you've done, and you mentioned it. Just being out of undergrad and being able to raise takes a lot of courage and confidence, and creating that credibility with somebody who's going to put their money. Because we all know that it takes a certain number of iterations to learn and to experience failure and to come back. And of course, you must have generated that confidence in people to be able to do it. So kudos to you. And on the second piece, just to kind of clarify, because I don't come from that domain of venture capital, one thing that bothers me as an entrepreneur is that how much do you dilute? Because each time you raise a round, you're diluting your stake, which maybe I feel, and I may be wrong, that is taking away some autonomy from
Mm-hmm.
functioning, which many times the companies need. And of course, in the end, coming from more traditional business background, in the end, the reality is in profitability and being able to churn those resources and being able to really create businesses that don't need venture funding. They may still need some equity, or they may need some debt, but doesn't need venture funding. So, would love to hear your thoughts on those two ideas. That how do you see dilution, and how do you see the idea of being able to stand on your feet in terms of not wanting venture funding? So how does that work? Educate me. I'm actually wanting to learn on how you see that as a young company.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think, initially we weren't as sensitive to dilution, mainly because we knew we needed that support, especially early on, and we knew we needed the right partners around the table. If I think back to the dilution and the impact that it's made on just our autonomy, I really think that if you find the right investors and the right partners, they respect that the mission remains, yours, and the vision remains yours, and their goal and their job ultimately is to just help support you and help you get there. And so we've been very fortunate to have the right partners around the table who feel like partners rather than investors. And I think that it's thinking about like the ultimate goal for our business and making sure that the value of it is real for the industry, and having a small piece of that or a big piece of that, I think, to me, means less than the impact we make. So maybe I'm coming from a little bit of a different mindset there. And then I think just knowing that we should never have to fundraise. I think that's the goal, is that we should fundraise because we want to either bring in that partner, or we want to be able to scale for a certain reason. And so I think in the first few rounds, sometimes you need to fundraise because you need to continue innovating and building your technology. But at this stage, after our A, the goal is to fundraise only for strategic reasons. And I think we're all aligned on that from a company perspective.
I'm super impressed that you're able to hold your own in these crazy financial discussions because, because the aim of the funder multiple times is for multiple, kind of growth. Of course, I agree with you, if they're aligned on your vision, it helps. But end of the day, they're putting in money and they want money out. That's their business, right? So you as a youngster being able to hold that place and being able to get the right people is really remarkable. And I'm really happy that you've done that. And I'm going to shift completely. Lots of awards. What is
Mm.
that like? Forbes 30 under 30, Rotman Leader to be watched, HSBC National Woman Leader. That's remarkable, Nuha. It's so beautiful to see somebody who's so driven by her passion being recognized. What has that been like, and how did that come about?
Yeah, it's definitely, big milestones. The Forbes 30 under 30 was on my like dream list, like it is for most. But, even though there are awards with either Kritika and I, it truly is the team, and I can't even imagine how the last 5 years would have been without the team we've had. So, usually when we do receive an award, it's a team award, and I always want to make sure that the team feels like they're a part of it. But very grateful to be able to be recognized, of course, for our work.
You're being super modest in that. I don't want to talk about that. That's fine. Let's brush over. Let's move to the next one. I love the way you answered that. Yeah, it's an award. It's okay. But yeah, but that's the beauty of the person you are. The key is actually in the work that we do, right? In the end, okay, great, we are recognized, and that might help us with more business. But and that's how I look at it as well. And
Yeah.
but it's beautiful to hear from you. And coming to the team, it's just really nice to see such a diverse team. And what I noticed was significant amount of people of color, lots of women. How have you been very intentional about hiring? And why I ask that is that we want to build a really diverse team, but it's tough because many times you have to position talent over diversity.
Yeah.
And typically because of the way humanity is structured, of course experience and talent lies with men who are over 40, and that's not easy. So how did that happen? Was this by design? Were you very intentional in going about it? And how did you figure that out?
hmm yeah, I mean, starting the company with two other women, so being completely women owned from the very beginning, and also being young, I think did influence just the way we thought about how we wanted to build our team. I think the foundation for us was that we always knew to build what we were trying to build, which is this solution for a global community. We needed to make sure we had diverse perspectives around the table. And that still holds true. We think the best products are designed by the most diverse teams. And I think it organically happened in a lot of ways for us. Um, but I do feel like we always tried to make sure that it was just the right person and the right talent, and diversity kind of just came with that. And I think it may have been um, subconscious in certain ways, right, for us to be hiring our team. But it is truly our superpower. I would say that the diversity of our team is what sets us apart in a lot of ways.
I couldn't agree more. Just the variety of ideas that are generated by when you have people from different backgrounds, different orientations, it kind of just changes the whole situation. And it's been a personal struggle for me to kind of have, because I inherited a more traditional business. So, to pivot that has been a personal struggle, and I still continue to kind of hit my head against that. So it's beautiful to see that you were able to kind of incorporate it in the design itself in a way. So a couple of questions, just again learning more. What is the average age of your team? And then in terms of management ethos, and this is actually a deeper kind of trying to understand from you. How do you see independence, autonomy, trying to have the team work as independent, people who are ready to work with lesser fear and bring their creativity up. How do you tackle that? What is your management ethos? Average age and management ethos.
Average age, I'm gonna have to get back to you. I don't even know if we know the average age. I can tell you we've done assessments on just the overall makeup of our team, and more than 50% of our team is identifying as women. I think around 70% of our team are people of color. And average age is a good one. We should add that into the questionnaire. I don't know if we do that already.
What's the
But
oldest?
yeah,
What's the oldest?
ooh, oldest. Mm, oldest is probably late 50s,
Okay, that's not
60s.
bad.
Yeah.
That's a significant
Yeah.
age this, and I guess the youngest would be mid 20s, early 20s.
Yeah, early 20s to early 60s. So that's the age range in our team.
Wow, that's really
Mm,
cool. That's really
yeah.
great. Yeah, and that actually builds my second question even better because now you're dealing with a larger spectrum that I had imagined. So
Yeah.
a 20-year-old Gen Z would behave very different from a boomer at 60 plus. I would love to learn more from you about your management ethos and how do you function.
Yeah, I think that we have respect for each other regardless of our ages, and that was really important for us as young founders to make sure we were hiring individuals who came with expertise, and in some cases were recent grads. But ultimately, when you walk into this room, we are equal in our ideas and our thoughts, and we always want to make sure we're being inclusive and collaborative to that because yes, even though someone may have expertise or years of experience in a certain industry, what we're doing at Erthos is completely new. So it's not something that you'll already have experience in. So I think it's important to have a balance. We have operational experts. We have experts that we've brought in from industry who support kind of the scale up and the business side. But our R&D and innovation teams are young and they're diverse in their own ways as well. So I think we've tried to make sure that there's a good balance, but ultimately everyone feels like they can challenge each other and they have that ultimate respect for everyone's thoughts and perspectives.
Yeah, I'm amazed that you've been able to create that culture because that's what matters in the end. If people feel like this is theirs and they can speak up and they can create what they want to create, it just changes the whole scenario. And especially considering that you as a younger person have the responsibility to be able to respect a certain person of a different age and they earning your respect is also an important part, and to be able to juggle that, I'm sure it's not as straightforward as we are making it out to be, but I'm sure you've managed to learn through the process and will continue to learn. I'm going to pivot totally. Talk to me about baking and coffee.
Ah, baking and coffee. Um, I love to bake. I love to do it. I love to bake just to make sure that I'm doing something other than work. And it's the one thing that I know I can't use my phone, like because I'm usually baking, I can't use my phone, I can't use my laptop. So it's the best way to disconnect. And coffee is, I think, one of the secret ingredients to Erthos because I cannot operate without it. So I always like to make sure we're well caffeinated here at Erthos.
Yeah, I've heard. I'm not active on Instagram and stuff. I'm only there because of my daughters, more or less. But I've heard from Alex that there's a significant amount of beautiful coffee pictures on your Instagram. So, so I was like, huh, that's interesting. Let's go to how do you see the future of Earthos? What is an ideal state if you look at 5 years or 10 years? You choose the time horizon. And in terms of scale and impact, what would give you true happiness if you achieve this in the next 5 to 10 years? What is that? This.
Mm. Our vision is for biomaterials to become the norm. We want it to become a part of our everyday lives. And I think the past 5 years for Earthos has been very much so focused in on innovating and developing our own materials and products and really creating these solutions. But I think the next 5 years will be all about scaling, accelerating, and partnerships and making sure we're doing everything we can to really increase the speed of adoption. And I think it goes back to the impatience we have and the fact that we don't have a lot of time. So I think 5 years from now, we hope that biomaterials and sustainable materials are truly a part of our daily lives, and it's not just a nice to have. So that's our hope.
And that's a beautiful hope to mainstream all biomaterials, and you just use them as citizens, just in everything. So that's beautiful. And that takes me to my final question. What, according to you, is good garbage?
Good garbage is circular, it's regenerative, and it's plant powered.
Wow, succinct and clear. Thank you, Nuha. As always, this has been a wonderful conversation. I'm glad that we could align our calendars, especially with the debacle of the last couple of days, and have this conversation. It's always a joy to see you. It energizes me to kind of see that we have such hope coming as entrepreneurs like you come into the fray and build for the future. So thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for taking the time and joining me on this show. And I look forward to seeing you very soon.